Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching, and we are back in the Star Wars universe this week painting up some Mandalorian inspired speeder bikes for the Empire. So why Mandalorian inspired? Because these are just speeder bikes. It's partly to the dirty colour scheme that the stormtroopers are actually in, a bit muckied up like you've seen in the Mandalorian series with the remnant troopers, but also the speeder bikes themselves. If you watch the original and proper films, they're brown sort of colour scheme. In the Mandalorian though, the actual troopers ride a more sort of off-white grey coloured bike, so that's the difference. So we'll crack on to that. Now before we do anything else, we've undercoated in black spray paint, and then really we're laying down a base coat of grey onto that black just to put a little bit of highlighting and details on there. So this is a really super light dry brush on all the areas that we're going to be leaving black essentially, with that kind of cold grey colour. So very little paint going down here, as you'll see, but it is just picking out some of those details that will be covered over with the white armour and things, but obviously in the areas we're leaving black will give a nice highlighted effect. So now we're working the actual armour. So we're going to do a sort of grey-white colour on the speeder bike, and then a sort of bone-white warmer colour onto the trooper themselves. So we're using a cold grey colour to put the base coats down. Nice thin base coat, and you see I'm working in the direction of the armour, so we don't want it to be all streaky and the brush strokes move all over the place. And then the general tip really is, wherever you're going over the armour of the model, don't go into or like the vents and the cracks. You want to leave those things showing, and you can leave a little bit of that black showing through just in the real recessed crevices. So once that's done, we're moving on to the bone white of the Stormtrooper. Now this is the exact same colour scheme that I've already done for Stormtroopers on the channel, so if you check out the Star Wars playlist you'll see that. No real difference to the colour scheme, apart from these models, because the Scout Troopers got more black showing, so that pre-stage of the dry brush with that grey just adds a bit of highlighting that we didn't do in the original Stormtroopers. Now the model on the left here has had just one layer of bone white across the armour, the one on the right has had two layers. That's the point with this. Thin coats are always better, and you will have to do a couple of coats with the kind of bone white colour to build up on top of the black because of how thin that coat is, but it's always better for thin coats to avoid blocking any detail and give a nicer finished effect. Now talk about detail, moving on to some of the details in the models. Not a lot of extra bits on these models, so we're working on a desert yellow on the roll that's on the back there. I've picked desert yellow because the Rebel Troopers, if you watched that video, I used desert yellow for their clothing, and it kind of feels appropriate, you know, flying around sort of Tatooine-y things, good colour to use. Now the detail on the buttons and things on the console, just picking literally three colours, a blue, an orange, a yellow, and putting the colours on different buttons on each different speeder bike to make it look like the console sort of reading different things. So not a huge amount of detail on these models to really go to town with. Now touching up after you've done it, especially on the black areas, there's always going to be those little areas where you'll have put either the white or the grey onto something that's meant to stay black. So just a little bit of touching up with some black paint if you need to, before you let it thoroughly dry and then do the wash stage. Now I'm using what is my favourite dirty wash colour, which is a Vallejo Sepia Game Wash. This deposits quite a lot of dirt and residue on the models. If you want a cleaner effect and you don't want to have to do some of these later stages, you might want to use a slightly cleaner sepia coloured wash, like some of the Games Workshop sepias, or even Army Painter and Vallejo do all the sepia washes that aren't quite as dirty. But I like the dirtied up effect to make them look like, you know, remnant troopers. And now we're going to take slightly different paints. We're using the same sort of base colour, mixing in a little bit of white in with this here. I'm going back over the armour panels we've already done. So this is the cold grey we've already used, 50-50 mixed with an off-white mix. You'll notice we're not using pure white at any point in this paint scheme. Believe it or not, pure white on models doesn't end up looking actually white, and it's that gradation of colours and building up from a darker colour up to the white that makes the model actually look white, especially when we're going for two different kind of off-white colours. Now when we're putting this mix down, we don't want to be getting into the recesses and all the gaps and cracks where the wash has settled. You want to make it look like a gradiated paint scheme, and it will anyway because you put in a slightly off mix from what you originally put down, but don't go into the gaps, the cracks and the corners. You want some of that dirt to show through as though it's settled kind of into the armour. Just thought it'd be interesting to show you what and how I mix the paint. The original cold grey there, I did an initial mix that I ended up not using, thought it was too dark. That's the 50-50 mix. And then what I did was really watered down that off-white colour, which looks pure white on here, but it isn't. And it's really watered down with probably 80% water onto the paint, and then just a real thin glazing layer over the top surface of all this grey. So this is the closest we're going to get to using pure white in here. It doesn't lift the grey up to be a pure white, it just takes a bit of that dark edge off the model. And really, because we're going to use the off-white colour as a final colour on both these models, should in theory give the same sort of warm tones at the end. So now I'm going to work on the bone white. We're going straight back in with the Vallejo Bone White we've already used. This is not a mixed colour. Again, with the same principles. We're making sure we don't go into the recesses and the cracks. We're just putting this on the raised area where the light's going to hit and all those sort of flat panels, getting rid of some of the areas where the wash might have settled too thick on a flat panel, but leaving it in all the gaps and recesses. And we will end up with two different colours of white on this model. Not a pure grey on the speeder, but also not really a white. And on the model itself, a sort of not quite a pure white, more of a warm sort of bone white colour. I hope that kind of description makes a little bit of sense. So showing again how and now this next layer we're going to mix. We've got the bone white on the left. On the far right, we've got that off-white colour. 50-50 mix in the middle. You can see they're making a bit of a mess on my wet palette, but that's how I've mixed the colours together. And then we're painting this now with a Vallejo bone white and off-white 50-50 mix over the top of that bone white. So we're not going to the pure off-white, and I'm not doing the off-white wash that I did on the grey, because I think the actual armour just needs that little bit more of a pop of that off-white colour. And it really does look like we're painting with pure white now, but we're not. It's you know, still not quite pure white, and it works a nice effect. What you could do once this has dried is you could then take the off-white without mixing it and just do a very, very gentle edge highlight on the real key raised areas. But I didn't feel the need for that with this model because I was going for more of a, like I say, remnant inspired dirty stormtrooper scheme. But you could absolutely use that and lift it up another level. Highlighting other sections, really easy. Take the exact colour used before, so we're using the Army Painted Desert Yellow and just highlighting that roll that's on the back of the speeder bike there. Didn't feel the need to go up any other kind of highlighted colours. And that's the beauty of doing this kind of Mandalorian inspired scheme, is that we want that kind of dirty effect, but this will absolutely work for, you know, original traditional Stormtrooper colours if you do the Empire scheme. Now it's touching up again just with a little bit of black, because that's definitely the area you're going to notice if you've spilled any of the white or the grey over. And then once that's touched up, that's the paint scheme done. So nice, remnant, dirty, mucky, inspired scheme, which I think fits in really nicely. Now there is a lot of Star Wars content on my channel, so check all those things down below in the links and everything. And there'll be more Star Wars coming up soon because I've just pre-ordered the rather exciting new Ewoks that have been released. So yeah, check the channel out, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and hopefully I will see you on another video.